House and Senate negotiators reach a final deal on the New Hampshire budget. Coming up in the cloakroom. Hi, I'm Grant Bosse from the Josiah Bartlett Center for Public Policy, and this is The Cloakroom, our weekly video magazine looking at New Hampshire public policy. This week, a House-Senate Committee of Conference reached final agreement on a two-year $10.3 billion budget package that cuts state spending over 10% from 2 years ago. One of the last additions to the package was a 10-cent cut in the state's tobacco tax. Critics say that'll cut state revenue when the state needs it most, but supporters like Senator Chuck Morse and Representative Lynne Ober, who headed up budget negotiations, says cutting taxes, especially at the border, will increase sales and increase revenues.
I don't believe this will lose revenue for the state of New Hampshire. Living in a border community, I've had nothing but positive comments of wanting this to move forward. I truly believe this will stimulate the economy in that section. It's not just going to be cigarette sales. If people come to New Hampshire and spend money on cigarettes, they're going to spend it on other things. I mean, this is one part of our budget, and I think it was a good compromise, and we're going to move forward.
There was a criticism that said that the tobacco companies are simply going to use this as an opportunity to rake more money out of consumers and keep the prices where they are now, and that there won't be a change.
I live in a border town, as does Chuck, and I have heard from all of the mom and pop stores there that say, please give us this, we can lower our prices, we will see more sales, we will see more customers. So I'm in Hudson, Chuck's in Salem. I think that's going to be the same along all of our borders.
I think we keep this positive for the state of New Hampshire. A tax reduction, of this nature is actually, in my opinion, a revenue producer. So I think this helps our businesses that are definitely having tough times right now do something positive advertising-wise and move forward.
For the past two budgets, negotiators increased state revenue estimates at the 11th hour in order to pay for higher spending. Ober says the committee was able to reach agreement on a balanced budget this time by agreeing to revenue estimates up front and sticking to them.
The House and the Senate came to agree on revenue statements up front, so we worked within our budget consistently. And my hat's off to him.
Or about the same, 75 million.
Yeah, there's about a $500,000 difference. The general fund spend and adjustments in accounts are definitely different, but it's basically. I mean, the Senate said it was going to spend money in health and human services and public safety. The House agreed with us, and that's where we spent it. We haven't changed on that. The House agreed with that position, and I believe, just like Lynn said, we were trying to find a way to make this whole thing work. I mean, obviously, our spend is several $100 million less than where the governor was, and it's still there. There is no doubt the revenues were not there to do the big spends that some people wanted, and this is a tight budget. But we're living within our means. We didn't use any bonding. We didn't use any new taxing. I think it was difficult to do, and I think we spent it wisely.
The Senate version and the final version of the budget spends slightly more than the House version, but much less than that proposed by Governor John Lynch back in February. But Ober says much of the increased spending actually came from House negotiators for programs they wanted after their final budget had been sent over to the Senate.
And the House went and asked for money from Chuck. We needed nearly $4 million in kindergarten construction. We needed a huge amount to pay the third year of the portable payments. All these were in law. The governor took them out of his budget. We had hoped that we would get them in the capital plan. It just didn't happen. We went back to Chuck. Chuck was very gracious, and we said, we have this problem, we have that problem, we have this problem, and put money back into the budget. He did that. He didn't say, oh, too bad, you passed the budget, live with it. He just worked with us all the way. So some of the additions, in fact, many of the additions that are in the budget, the House had to go ask for, and he accommodated us. 100% of the time.
What are other examples of those additions that the House asked for?
Well, cultural resources is an interesting situation. Representative Valancourt wanted to cut the cultural resources. And the way he brokered that deal, because part of that department are the state libraries, he moved to take the budget for the state libraries, the staff, all the funding associated with them, and take it out of cultural resources and put it under the Secretary of State. So that wasn't a cut, that was a move. And then we cut the commissioner and we cut other things. We passed a budget, we sent it to the Senate, and we get a letter that says, do you know that the commissioner actually has a contract? You can't just cut him. He's not like an employee that you can cut. His contract runs for another year. You have to pay him. Way to go to Chuck and say, oops, could you put it back? So when they put it back, and I think rightly so, the Senate took the state libraries, which the House had preserved, and moved them back into cultural affairs.
In years past, the state has subsidized local retirement costs, paying 25 to 35% for firefighters, teachers, and police officers. Governor Lynch's budget proposed cutting that to zero. House and Senate budget negotiators put $3.5 million back into the budget to help pay for local retirement costs, and they got it eventually by raiding the highway fund.
We were going to try to get to a level of close to 25%, and again, that's a number that I think both the House and the Senate have had a hard time wrestling with, because that takes calculations that are done outside the State House by professionals, and we really don't have the tie right now, but we were told this morning that if we put $3.5 million in, we're pretty close. We basically, what the Senate did in its spending formula, had put $6 million in general funds into the Department of Safety. What we did was we took $3.5 million of those general funds and we put them to fund the retirement system because we needed general fund dollars, and we took highway dollars after reviewing the surplus statement this morning in the highway department, that we are positive $13 million there. We had the money to do it, so we moved it into the Department of Safety and paid for, which is how it was paid for in the past, quite honestly.
One of the most controversial cuts in the budget is a deep drop in aid to the community college system and the University System of New Hampshire, cuts that will likely result in higher tuition for New Hampshire students. Morse and Ober says that was one of the toughest decisions they had to make, but they didn't have the money since fiscal 11 is set to end with a deficit.
You heard the governor yesterday come in here and say, I'm in the red and I have to do this and I have to do that, will you help me? Now, he already had law that said you can raid the rainy day fund. There isn't enough money in the rainy day fund to cover how much red spending he's got. When we get to the end in 2 years, we will have a surplus. We won't have to deal with that with this budget. Yes, we've made some hard cuts. None of us like them.
And I think the answer to the question of did we make that decision up front is absolutely not. The Senate said when it was going through its process that there were 4 things that were going to be decided on based on how the revenue projections were working themselves through the process. I don't think anyone anticipated that the revenue, at least in the Senate, and I'm sure the House was being optimistic, that the House's numbers were going to be the numbers that we used and actually reduced as we went through this process. I mean, we said the community college system, the university system, uncompensated care, and the waiting list were the 4 things that we were going to wait for the final decisions on revenues to see where they were and decide how we were going to fund them. Beyond that, we did all our work in the departments. We came down to the end. We had about $6 million that we could put into the waiting list, and that was it. It stopped there, and we're going to live within our means, and that is going to be tough. I mean, Lynne pointed it out. 11 did not end balanced. We had to go to the governor. We had to work with him on how he was going to bring that into working, and quite honestly, hitting the rainy day fund was the last thing the governor or the Senate or the House would want to do. But the fact is, you need a balanced budget moving forward, and we weren't leaving this week without doing that. It would have been 14 more million in cuts out of our budget situation if we didn't balance that, because I don't think any of us would have agreed to this budget any other way.
The budget package, House Bill 1 and House Bill 2, now heads to the full House and Senate for final approval next week. It'll then head to Governor John Lynch's desk. He has not yet said whether he'll sign or veto the 2-year budget. The state fiscal year ends on June 30th, so negotiators will have just under 2 weeks to keep the doors open on New Hampshire state government. Thanks for joining us in the cloakroom for the Josiah Bartlett Center for Public Policy. I'm Grant Bosse.